Welcome everyone to Spirit Coffee Talk and happy day after solstice. Today is a really big day and we are so excited to dive in and chat about it with all of you. So I'm going to keep this a very short intro and dive straight in. How are you ladies feeling day after solstice? What's been going on?
Salty solstice. I feel a heck of a lot better than I did a week ago, that's for sure, or even 3 days ago. I feel like solstice has been well, the energy around it, like the couple days before solstice, and like I know today I can still feel it, but the whole concept of where there's bright light casts the biggest shadow, or coming out from the shadow is the only way that you can see pronounced light. And I feel this especially because solstice is all about celebration of the darkest time, right? When we go into our darkest time, I feel like from the shadows, I am seeing some of the most phenomenal light that I've seen in a very long time. So I feel like I'm coming out of the darkness for sure. And I have had some beautiful insights, my guides, Master Jesus, soul, and just connections. I don't know, like it's been really big. It's been a really big week for me.
Amazing. How about you, Elyse?
For me, it was an interesting kind of busy 3D day. So I found myself, especially when I was out, it's been such a busy week, and I've really felt almost like circumstantially I've been kind of kept in the 3D. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's like I just, because of the timelines this year, I have lost all sense of time. So the fact that it was like, oh, Christmas is on Monday and I have a million things still to do somehow really caught up with me. And so I was feeling really kind of disoriented time-wise this week, which really led me to having to be quite 3D busy, just running the errands and getting the groceries and doing the things. And so when I'm doing that, I tend to pull myself out of the energy a little bit, whether that's conscious or unconscious. I think just because it can be hard to be out in the world and feel super open to the energies. So I kind of was a little, I'll say shut down from it this week. But then yesterday, I had another really kind of busy day circumstantially. And um, even keeping my while I was out and about and some of my other work that's not spirit based, I it like came in and it was like, actually no, you're
Yeah.
gonna experience some of this. And so, my dad popped in, he had me come and like visit his grave and gave some pieces of wisdom. And one of the things that he kept saying was surrender into the darkness. And I was like, okay, well, like I think I've been doing that, right? We talked on Dark Night of the Soul of how I, going through these things, we have to really like surrender into it, which can be challenging. So I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting piece of wisdom because I feel like I've been doing that. And then as the day progressed, the I'll say pull on my physical body was so insane. I was sitting on the couch. I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna work, a couple days before the Christmas holiday, I'm gonna work on the couch with my doggies. And I think it took me like 2.5 hours to write one email because I was getting pulled out of my body so consistently to the point where and it would come in these really intense waves where it was like, la la la, trying to do things, and then just like, whoa. And eventually I had to lay down and I had to surrender into the darkness because and I felt like I had the bed spins. I don't drink. And it was a very uncomfortable feeling because I have not experienced that in a very, very long time.
Oh,
But laying on the couch, I was just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And there were these vortexes whirling in front of my face. And at one point, I'm like shot up looking above the earth and like observing, like floating in space. And then all of a sudden, I'm back down in my body. And it was wild how
mm,
intense that kind of cycle was. And the only thing that really allowed it to move and for me to finally settle was just to really like surrender into it, which was really challenging because you know, I think I'm pretty good at like feeling my feels and like doing my stuff, but
You
physical
definitely are.
discomfort,
yeah, you are. You're a
but like
pro.
physical discomfort is hard, right? And I have a long history of that with endometriosis and stuff. And so it's like feeling not good in my body is a hard place for me to just like surrender into. And so that
Yeah.
feeling of not being in control of my body and like not feeling fully connected to it was really wild. And so I really had to just like surrender into it. So I think the
Good
energy, as
for
I think you were saying, was
you.
pretty intense still today. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking later I'll maybe tune into it in a different way. But yeah, it was very physical for me yesterday. Very
You
physical.
Yeah.
know, it was surprisingly physical to me. And so I say that not, well, let me just explain what I mean. So the day before the solstice for me felt very like energetically and internally, like in my being, in my spirit, in my mind, very freeing. And I was feeling the return of the light already. And I mean, I had cosmic consciousness, so I was right in that energy in the cosmic consciousness circle. Um, but then yesterday was surprisingly very physical in a way that I didn't expect. And I know for me, I'd finished with some clients and then I went to just kind of clear my energy. And all of a sudden I felt this energy come on, kind of like you were saying, Elyse, where you're pulled out of your body. And I've had that happen many times before, but this one was different. This one felt like everything in my body was about to short circuit, is the way it felt. It felt like bed spins. And no, I wasn't drinking either. It felt like I was maybe about to throw up, which is usually the body's response to when things feel chaotic, right? Um, and then I also felt like I was going to pass out or have a seizure or something. Like I felt like I was short
Wow.
circuiting through my entire being. And at first, I actually felt fear. I was like, what's going on? And then I was just like, I'm just going to surrender. Like, I'm just going to surrender. And I laid on the couch and I surrendered. And then I felt this, like, if I had an elastic coming from the back of my heart chakra out to like old timeline. And same with my sacral chakra. I felt them both be cut and like snap back.
Yeah.
And then I felt instantly fine. And
Mm.
I was like, oh my gosh. And it didn't make sense until we were talking this morning how, Lisa, you were mentioning that a lot of the solstice was also about like physically in the body arriving in the new timeline. So, like, for some people, it might be your body arrived first and your mind and spirit like link in after. But I realized for myself, there was two parts, two chakras left still connecting to like the old timeline. It was pulling really, 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 really tight. And then they finally snapped. And the difference that I felt in my body energy last night, even though I had 3 hours of dance last night. Like that's a long time for
Oh,
me. I
what
know
a
some
great
people
way
could
to
do
move
that.
it through your body, though. Hey.
It's so true. And I was able to keep up full energy at the very end of my last class at 8:30 last night. Hip hop, I was still full out energy, which I even was noticing. I'm like, this is weird. Why am I not exhausted and on the floor? And so there's this like different energy running through. So I, again, all to say is I'm surprised, but also really like in awe of how physical the transition was for me yesterday. So I wasn't
Spirit
expecting it.
Spirit reminded me as you were talking, so I was like, I feel like there was something else. And they reminded me as you were talking, what it they told me when I was like when I first kind of laid down, I was like, what is this? Like this is really intense. And collectively a lot of the spiritual world has been talking about like this solstice and like really solidifying or shifting in a new timeline, a new experience, a new etc. And they were like, I liken it to really intense motion sickness. You are moving so fast through space and time linearly, the way that we would think of it, but non-linearly as well, that it's like you're on a bullet train and if you experience motion sickness, it's this like and that was the one thing that they said is within the darkness find a fixed point, find it, because for me when I do get motion sickness in my 3D experience, and I have to like eyes forward find something ahead of me to focus on because it's like the stuff going by so fast that disorients me. And so they were like, in the darkness find a fixed point and just focus in, because this is exactly um like motion sickness.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't realize beforehand what like it's like I didn't even go into the anticipation of solstice. I knew it was there, but there was like nothing that I had any foresight on. I didn't have any info.
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like going in and being like, oh yeah, it's solstice tomorrow kind of thing. But I had a very traumatic week. Like I moved more trauma and through my body in the last week than I think I had in like combined probably like 20 years straight. But what I'm understanding right now is giving it to me like in time that moving into this timeline. So that's how they showed me too. Solstice was like actually me getting into this new timeline, right? And I had to release these old I don't want to say karmic ties because it wasn't necessarily like my soul's karmic ties. What it was like deep level attachments that were actually made in this life due to unresolved soul trauma almost. And that I played through in like book one, which I call book one, which is like my life up until like now. In order for me, because I'm turning 40 and I knew from 40 on is like book two. And it's like, instead of like a walk-in or whatever, I've like gathered up other soul aspects of myself and interlaced it into this being to be able to move forward to do like my second mission. Like first book was like karmic tie-ups, learning, healing, growth from my physical, spiritual, emotional. And book two is like my mission for humanity in life. Okay, so I have like two books, two lives within one. Okay, so this is all Cole's notes. What I realized is that I need to be in this higher frequency timeline in order to enter book two. But I wasn't getting on the tracks properly because I was still deeply attached to certain things from book one. And in the last week, so it was almost like destined or designed for me to be into this higher frequency timeline for solstice, because that's like my new year versus like January 1, right? But it wasn't happening. There was still these ties. And it was like, okay, these little things are helping, but they're not disconnecting these ties. And so a major event had to occur in order for me to hit into a new timeline. And it hit with a bang. And I'll tell you, but the way in which I transmuted the energy that came from the trauma was like book two type energy versus book one type energy, and how to deal with the trauma, right? So it was very different. I was processing it very differently. So then solstice yesterday and how I was connecting into this higher frequency timeline, into this like crystalline energy that was available, was very outside of my body, but very physical as well. Very like I had to like ground and then kind of go and ground. And same thing, like I'm doing all these 3D human stuff, like kids galore, like last minute gifts, scheduling. I got another cat.
I was gonna say there's a new member. I saw
There's a new
him on
member,
your lap.
Shadow. He was sitting
Yeah.
on my lap just a minute ago, but he's like, he called me in. He called me in and I found him, and I've been talking about this cat. I think I even said it on
You did. You did.
Yeah. But so he finally called me and I found him, and it's like what transpired within the last week was almost a lifetime. So when they say time was really slowed down and really sped up at the same time, both is true.
Yeah.
Because the amount of like experience, healing, downloading, transmuting, shifting was like 20 years of work, I would say, in a week. And then the last 3 days, well, today being third, so last 2 days, today being the third day, is like sped up, but also slowed down in the way of like transmutation and like shifting into a higher frequency. And so that's why I'm all dressed up today, because I had ceremony, and I had like this sacred feminine ceremony this morning where I was like lighting candles and I was moving smoke and I was like dancing with crystals, and I was like having this very deep earthing kind of feminine sacred ceremony to bring in book two, ladies. It's been very deeply emotional and also like uplifting and hugely transformative in a way that I'm not sure I've ever really experienced. And we talked so much about the slingshot effect, but really they showed it to me like an arrow.
I've
Because
been seeing the arrow too.
and the arrow,
Really
yeah.
seeing it.
They're
Yeah.
like, it's not even slingshot because that has less, when you do a slingshot, it has less of a like direction. It's more like a, and it's kind of lower vibration slingshot kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like direct, like focus of the arrow. And when we pulled it back, the energy of the solstice was the last point because it's like the furthest, it's the most dark before it's like sailing right into the light.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And I
It's
think
going, guys. And that was
yeah.
the detachment. That's what you felt. We all felt was these deep rooted detachments from the old stuff.
Yeah. And a message to carry on with that arrow piece that Spirit said too, just yesterday or the day before, I think it was the day before, was that many are going to start to see where the arrow hits, like right after Christmas. Like again, the end of the 20s, right? The last of the 20s of December, people will start be able to see where this arrow is hitting. And it's more than one arrow for people too, right? Like you may have 10, you may have 2, whatever it is, but it's going to be hitting its mark. So we're going to be able to start to notice things and see things and notice our perspectives changing and our feelings about things changing and in many different ways. And that's why it's hard to explain exactly what, because it is so individualized. But I think the symbolism we're using is something that is very collective.
Yes.
Right? Like collective arrows, big time, collective
100%.
perspective shifts. But what it hits is very individual to you.
It makes me feel almost emotional because so much of what we've been feeling is like, what is this? Why does it feel so heavy? It's like, what do you want to detach from? What are the things you want to let go of? We're cleaning house, getting into the corners. It took us like 2 full years to really, really get into that. And we'll still continue. It's not like the work is ever done, but it was really about sailing forward now. It really is.
I think there's like a recalibration now too for people like, or yeah, I'm going to say recalibration would be the word, because if your recalibration is an invitation to rest and just lay on the floor, arms out, and you're like, I made it, and whatever that looks like for you, or maybe your recalibration is dressing up and like putting time into yourself, or maybe it is whatever it is for you. Like, what is your recalibration?
Yeah.
And it could be many things too. It could be a rainbow full of things.
Totally.
To actively take part in your recalibration now. I think that's like
does that
a
ever feel
invitation.
nice?
Yeah.
Actively participate in your recalibration right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
I hear you.
Because sometimes feeling like that outside perspective of observation, that has been really, really helpful. Right. But being actively involved in that recalibration or that higher timeline or that like set perspective of your higher frequency. And when all of a sudden you get momentum to go forward and you can see it, be like, okay, no, get in the front seat. I keep seeing like my like box car as I'm like going down the track because I'm like, I can see the light, but it's fun. I got my babies with me, my animals, and I'm like, okay, I'm going towards my acreage. I'm going towards like starting my podcast, and I'm going towards like working more with women and children. And like, I'm like, yeah, I'm on my little going through, right? But actively engaging in it versus sitting out and being like, this is what I want. I'm really trying to manifest this. It's like, no, I'm on the cart. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So with that being said, do you both have, because this is going to be our last episode before the new year.
Yeah, it is.
So if we all just sort of taken a moment, or at least it sounded like you were shuffling cards. Were you shuffling cards before?
Yeah.
Was it pertaining to what we were talking about? Because I was going to see what is the tune in or what is the insights for what's to come, but I don't want to miss if you had a thing with what we were talking about before.
It's both and. So maybe we could end
How
with
about you
this
just start us off? Yeah.
Okay. So, Ginette, I think it was you that bought me this deck for my birthday. And
Yeah.
this deck
I
This
brought that
card,
down today too.
yeah, this card
Oh,
stalks
that's
me.
a good
Like,
card.
I
That's a great
swear
card.
I pull this card 90% of the time that I use this deck. Like to the point where I'm like, are there other cards? Because I don't even know 95% of them.
Only that.
Really?
Yes. And so it's the sacrament of extreme unction. And so extreme unction translates into the last anointing. And so last night I was pulling cards and I was like, okay, what's the before solstice? What's the after solstice? And this was the after solstice. I pull this card. I'm going to read the summary, but I pull this card for every journey, everything. And so it says, your heart knows how to let go so you can find peace. It is time for you to experience spiritual closure. So that's reading very book 1, book 2 to me. A beautiful new reality is opening up for you. Entering it requires you to release your attachment to the past. You have been inwardly preparing for a powerful rebirth. Now is the time to trust in what is meant for you and move toward it with an opening, trusting heart and peaceful mind.
That's a mic drop moment right there. I wish I
I
could drop
love
this
it
microphone
so
and hang.
much.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's stunning.
So that's what they said last night was to come for us post-solstice, and they were reminding me.
Yay!
Because I wasn't pulling it
Thank you
necessarily for today.
Sharing that.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. Lisa, do you have a share?
No, I shared my share.
Okay. I want to finish with this then. Is these two beautiful cards that keep haunting me for all of us. The first one is birthing a new age. This says birthing new creations, dreaming a new world into being. This is what we have been doing and are continuing to do, especially with these kind of almost like ripples of like progress that's happening and the focused intent inside. And I love that what it's essentially doing is with this Lemuria card is creating heaven on earth.
Oh,
Right? It's happening. So I just think this is such a neat way to express all the things we've been talking about. The card that you just pulled, Elyse, we are in this process and we have been, but we're starting to see these creations taking place, the greenery, the growth, the harmony. It's not just an idea. It's actually growing. And so I think it's such beautiful symbolism. And I just also want to acknowledge that like this journey hasn't been easy for anyone. And I just think holding space for all of us collectively of that recognition for each and every person. And that it doesn't mean it's just going to be simple moving forward, but we have so much more knowledge, so many more skills, and a bigger building community of support in our worlds, like in our lives, to help us continue moving forward. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I wanted to say that too, that, you know, there is still a lot of suffering that we see in the world. And if you are experiencing that shift into that Lemuria type energy, holding that suffering for those people in your space, in your heart. Yeah, I think that's important.
Amazing. Okay. Well, happy solstice, happy post-solstice, ladies and everyone. And wishing all of you a beautiful holiday season, however you celebrate. And as well, new year, a beautiful entry into 2024. And may you do what is needed for you to recalibrate today forward and give yourself the gift of whatever it is you need in the many ways that it is.
And trust.
So, yeah,
Trust.
Absolutely.
That word just keeps coming up, is trust.
Yeah, I love it. All right, everyone, have a beautiful rest of your day. We'll see you all in 2024.